a believer in the principles of classical republicanism. You believe in cycles. There are cycles of decay and there are cycles of renewal.
We are part of an attempt to put together an independent intellectual right, one that exists without movement conservative funding, and one that our opponents would be delighted not to have to deal with.
Rediscovering Mencken in 2008 produces a kind of dizzying ideological reversal effect, in which we learn that much of what we take for granted as part of the new right, or as the conservative movement, at least in the last 20 years, was simply not so in the age of Mencken and Knock.
I would also stress the possibility for positive change represented by our organization. We have youth and exuberance on our side, and a membership that is largely in its 20s and 30s. We have attracted, beside old-timers like me, as I note in my introductory paragraph, well-educated young professionals, and this group considers itself to be on the right, but not of the current conservative movement. These post-paleo-conservatives, to whom I've alluded in website commentaries, have come out here tonight in force, and they are radical in the sense in which William F. Buckley once defined a true right, an oppositional force that tries to uncover the root causes of our political and cultural crises.
This is a conference where the audience really matters. Looking around the room, I'm struck with the high quality of the individuals here. There are a lot of you here making real contributions. That's not what we'd expect to see nowadays in what's left of the conservative movement, a conference held by the conservative establishment. The big problem we have is not hate speech, but what he calls hate facts. In other words, there are things that everybody knows are true but can't be said. The rapid shift of the need for Republicans to mobilize their white base is a hate fact, and it can't be said, but it still remains true. What's happened here, of course, is that this equality meme has obviously gotten out of its cage. It's broken loose of from any connection to equality before the law, which is a kind of a legitimate and traditional use of the concept of equality. And it's been wandering around the countryside, killing sheep and generally terrifying people for 30 or 40 years.
For culturalism, what I'm calling culturalism, shares many of its roots with Marxism. The strongest opposition to the scientific study of human nature has come from a small number of Marxist biologists and anthropologists who are committed to the view that human behavior arises from a very few unstructured drives. They believe that nothing exists in the untrained human mind that cannot be readily channeled to the purposes of the revolutionary socialist state. When faced with the evidence of greater structure, their response has been to declare human nature off limits to further scientific investigation. A few otherwise very able scholars have gone so far as to suggest that merely to talk about the subject is dangerous. Mao Zedong, for example, wrote the following thing in 1958, with the Chinese masses in mind. Quote from Mao, Chairman Mao: "On a blank sheet of paper, free from any mark, the freshest and most beautiful characters can be written." The chairman then put his thought into action by launching the Great Leap Forward. Like all culturist projects, the Great Leap ended in tears. China's industrial development was set back a decade, and about 30 million people starved to death. In its extreme forms, culturism can be hazardous to your health. Not only is the culturist dogma flatly false, it's also poisonous and divisive. Biological explanation, by contrast, offers at least the hope of acceptance. After all, we accept our individual inequality for the most part. Probably there isn't a single person in this room who isn't better at something or other than I am. A better tennis player, a better mathematician, a better writer. We all accept that in most things, practically all of us are pretty mediocre. So if we can accept individual inequality, because we kind of know, even without going to the genetics labs for verification, we kind of know that it's just the roll of the biological dice. Perhaps if we could purge this culturist dogma from our society, the psychic unity of mankind is a myth.
Actually, some of these people know the history. When they don't write it, it means they know facts are getting in their way. And that's why they want to phrase the standards of the rhetoric to be moral rather than factual, because that's their comparative advantage. Not that they are moral, but they can be ideological by using buzzwords that have been around in the American grain ever since life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and all of that. In other words, they are masters at taking basically familiar American themes and redefining them in their own image. And facts, of course, get in their way, and they would like to have their audiences think that the way you approach any issue is through the ideological or moral rather than the factual. So I agree with what you're saying. That the public schools, if anything, emphasize the ideology and no longer the facts. You can see that with what, of course, has happened to the teaching of history in the public schools. And they essentially have laid the epistemological groundwork for with their politically correct modes of teaching for the neoconservatives to come in and give moral injunction. What I really believe that real conservatives should be doing is encouraging in all sorts of ways, wherever they can, private schools. And there are various versions of this that have been put forward by various kinds of conservatives, but clearly charter schools, parochial schools, religious schools, other kinds of schools, I think, that's what neoconservatives should be, who have some special calling in the kind of educational sector. I believe you will have the conjunction of an administration and a Congress that will be maniacally committed to using the public school as an engine to pushing politically correct progressive ideologies even more than in the past. And therefore, it's not just an abstract thing that would be a good thing. It's going to be necessary to preserve the America and the West as we know it.
So, I mean, in a way, this whole dumbing down effect of progressive education that began after World War I has succeeded. This discussion in the classroom that less than a quarter had any inkling what habeas corpus meant.
It seems to me that a more serious and realist evaluation of where our really fundamental, crucial interests lie and what we need to do to protect them is the way to understand things correctly.
When it comes to choosing colleges, America's middle class and upper middle class parents are like drugged up pop stars on Rodeo Drive. They buy by brand name without looking at quality of the product. They don't check to see whether the product has been delivered. And so this evolution, which I think you characterize quite well, the BA is not that much different from what a high school diploma used to be, both in terms of the way the employers think of it and also in terms of what a lot of kids learn, because the number of schools that are teaching genuine college educations to all of their kids are very small. So the evolution has occurred, but it's not because anybody has foisted it upon us. We have taken these status symbols and run with them. In my view, the educational system in the United States, public educational system, to some extent the private educational system, is living a lie. The lie is that every child can succeed on the academic track as far as he or she wants to go if the schools do their jobs. Does anybody really believe that any child can go as far as he or she wants to if the schools do their job? No. But will anybody say it? No, they won't. And the result plays out in devastating ways.